Ever notice how some folks, can't resist that extra slice of cake while others have an iron will?
Yeah, willpower.
Makes you wonder, right? Well, turns out our genes could be playing a bigger role in all this, especially when it comes to addiction, than we might think.
It's true.
So get ready to dive deep, everyone, because today we're untangling the fascinating world of genetics and epigenetics.
Oh, I like that. Untangling.
To uncover just how much our genes influence our vulnerability to addiction.
It's a really interesting area and an important one because, for a long time, addiction was seen as this moral feeling, right? Like a choice, something people could just stop doing if they wanted to.
Yeah, just willpower.
Exactly. But thankfully, we're starting to see it for what it is, a complex disease, just like any other, with multiple contributing factors. And guess what? Genetics is a key player.
Okay, so let's zoom in on that, shall we? That genetics piece. Big question.
Yeah.
How much of addiction is actually, hardwired?
The million-dollar question.
Right. Are we talking, predisposed from birth? It's already in the cards?
It's definitely more nuanced than just a yes or no answer. It's not quite as simple as saying, oh, you have this gene, so you're going to be addicted. It's really about susceptibility.
Okay, so walk us through that. Susceptibility.
Think of it like height, for example.
Okay, I get it.
Your genes, they give you a range, a potential, right? But whether you actually reach that full height depends on a lot of other things, like what you eat, your environment, all of that.
Right. So good nutrition, exercise, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And it's similar with addiction. Genes might make someone more susceptible, give them a higher chance, but it's not a guarantee. Environment, choices, even just random life events, those play a huge role too.
Okay, so not destiny, got it. But what about those studies, the science behind all of this? There's got to be some research backing this up. Give us the evidence.
Oh, there's tons of research, and it's fascinating. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from twin studies.
Oh, twin studies, always love those.
Right. Identical twins, they share 100% of their DNA, right?
They're like genetic clones.
Exactly. And researchers have found that they also share a much higher concordance rate for addiction compared to fraternal twins, who only share about 50% of their DNA.
Concordance rate. No, remind us what that means again.
Sure. It basically means the probability that if one twin has a certain trait or condition, the other twin will have it too.
Got it.
And for addiction, this rate can be as high as 50% for identical twins.
Wow, that is really high.
It is, which tells us that genes are definitely influencing things here.
So genes load the gun, basically, but environment pulls the trigger, something like that.
That's a pretty good way to put it, actually. But it even goes beyond just inheriting these genes. It's also about how those genes express themselves, which is where epigenetics comes in.
Epigenetics. Always a bit of a brain teaser for me.
I know, right? But it's super interesting stuff.
Break it down for us, would you?
Okay, imagine this. Think of your genes like a dimmer switch. They can be turned on or off or dimmed to different levels in between.
Okay, I kind of get that.
So epigenetics is basically the study of what controls those dimmer switches, and you guessed it, environment plays a huge role here. Things like, childhood trauma, stress, even your diet, believe it or not.
Wow, seriously?
Yeah, even exercise. All these things can impact how your genes actually express themselves.
No way.
It's true. And it's part of what makes us all unique. But it also means that even if you have a genetic predisposition for addiction, certain experiences can make you more or less likely to actually develop it.
So it's like some of those dimmer switches are getting cranked up to high, while others are getting turned way down.
Precisely.
Man, that's amazing and kind of scary.
Yeah.
How much our experiences actually get, under our skin, literally.
I know, it's pretty wild. But it highlights how intertwined our biology and experiences really are.
It really is. So any specific examples of these epigenetic influences in action, when it comes to addiction?
Oh yeah, for sure. One of the biggest ones, early childhood trauma.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Makes sense.
Sadly, there's a strong link there, increased risk of addiction later in life. Studies show that things like, say, chronic stress, it can actually change those methylation patterns.
Methylation patterns. Now that sounds complicated.
It's basically like, imagine it as these chemical tags that attach to your DNA and tell your genes what to do.
Okay, I see.
And those tags, they can get messed up by chronic stress.
Oh, wow.
And it can mess with those genes that regulate dopamine, which is the pleasure chemical in our brains. When those get out of whack, it can make someone way more susceptible to addictive behaviors.
So it's like the stress is actually changing the way our brains experience pleasure.
In a nutshell, yeah. It's important to remember, though, this doesn't mean that everyone who goes through trauma is destined to become addicted.
Right. Okay.
But it just shows us just how powerful these epigenetic influences can be.
For sure. It's like this incredible but slightly terrifying mix of nature and nurture.
Yeah.
What we're born with and what we experience all mix up together.
That's exactly it. It's a complex interplay, and we're only just beginning to scratch the surface of understanding it all.
So to sum it all up for our listeners today, we've learned that addiction is far more intricate than, well, maybe we once thought, right?
Absolutely.
It's not as simple as just making a choice.
Exactly.
It's a disease influenced by a whole bunch of factors, both our genes and our environment.
And understanding this complexity is so important.
Right.
Because it helps us approach addiction with more compassion and less judgment. It helps us develop better treatments, and it helps us fight the stigma that, unfortunately, still surrounds addiction.
Couldn't agree more. So listeners, as we continue to learn more about the human genome, about these complex interactions, it really begs the question, how can we use this knowledge, this understanding, responsibly? How do we take all this new information and actually improve prevention and treatment efforts for everyone? Something to think about, right? It's an ongoing conversation, and one that we'll definitely be revisiting here on The Deep Dive.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notification bell for more.